Fabulous. Is that cool? Is that right? Did I say it right? Yes. Okay, perfect. So I'm not sure, did everyone get a chance to look at the questions? Cool. How are folks feeling? Is anybody nervous? This is my first time hosting. Thank you all for being here. Please enjoy our lo-fi hip hop beats. Brought to you by Liz. Gonna get started in 2 minutes. Okay, so we are going to get started, everyone. Thank you for showing up and centering our voices today. Once again, if you need a reminder of where you are, we are at the webinar led by ORS and the Summer Camp Society, presenting Centering BIPOC Voices at Camp. This is where we're gonna have a discussion around how to decenter whiteness at camp and also in our DEI work. So before we get started, we want to make full use of these 2 hours. We are going to jump right into it and allow people to self-introduce themselves. So what it's going to look like is that I will show a picture, of course, and folks' bios, which you all should have seen if you signed up for this webinar, to honor the amazing work that they're doing. But one piece of whiteness and white supremacy is that we attach ourselves to what we can produce, to what we do, the work that we do. But we are so much more than that. And so I'm gonna allow each panelist, including myself, to self-identify what are the important pieces of our identity and ourselves that we wanna show you, that we wanna share with you on our own terms. So this is my bio here. I'm super thankful for you all. The things that are not listed on my bio are that I am a proud aunt of 2. I am a lover of dance, hip hop dance in particular. I love to travel, even though I wish my budget helped me to do that more, which is key. And I really do love the outdoors. I feel like my most self when I'm in the woods. And I'm just grateful for you all to be here. So that's a little bit about me. That's not on my bio. And next we have Jason Bushbecker.
Hi, yeah, I'm Jason, pronouns he, him, his. And what's not on my bio is I'm an avid photographer. I love the outdoors. Board games, video games, kind of nerdy stuff are in my wheelhouse, and I loved playing those types of games. I'm also a musician. I play, I think it's up to like 9 instruments now, something like that. Some of them better than others, naturally, but it is what it is.
Wow, I did not know that. I'm learning here too. Next, we have Akinyele Bruce.
Awesome. Yay, Jason on the instruments. I got to step my game up. Hello, everyone. My name is Akinyele Bruce, she and her. I am the daughter of Kathy Ann Bruce and Master Fahad Smart. I am the granddaughter of Shirley and Ignatius Bruce, and the great-granddaughter of Jane Rosie Harrigan and Clifford Smith. My people are from Brooklyn, Trinidad, India, and the Igbo tribe of Nigeria. I'm a sister, a granddaughter, a godmother, a friend. I'm a community organizer, a social worker, a teacher, a healer, storyteller, and a budding poet. And I'm a very proud Black woman. Thank you. And I'm gonna pass it on over to my next co-host.
I just need you to put that on your resume. It's powerful. And I love that I love that we share the Trinidadian connection. Every time I hear it, I get like uplifted. Next up, we have Elizabeth Ramirez.
Hello, everyone. Yep, I'm Elizabeth Ramirez. My camp nicknames are Liz Lizard or Liz Shark because it's pretty fun and easy to remember that way. I want to do what AK did, but my mother's name is Adahisa Rivera and my father is Hector Ramirez, and were both born in La República Dominicana. I am a first-generation American. What's not included here is that I'm a thrift shop god. It's how I love to pass my time. And I am soon leaving the camp community for a little bit to pursue a double master's degree, an MSW and an MBA. I hope to be back in the camp community and eventually, hopefully, work on my future business endeavors after.
Come through, y'all. It's just so much power in this call. I'm just so excited. My cheeks are gonna hurt from smiling. Thank you, Liz. Next up, we have Adela Effendi.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to continue speaking our guardians' names. So my name is Adela Effendi. My mother's name is Wida Wiyanti Sulaiman, and my father's name is Muhammad Lefty Effendi, and they both come from Indonesia. I'm also first generation. I am a mother of two young children, one 6-year-old and one 8-month-old, who you might see on here because he's going to wake up from his nap very soon. And I come from a family, particularly from my father's side, of peacekeepers. We have been, well, my family, my grandmother, the matriarch, who has since passed on and is now an ancestor of ours, but she has been the one to always peacekeep in our family whenever we've had issues with the community or within ourselves, just like any other family. And so I've learned a lot from her, even when I was young, since I was 5 years old. And I see the world through my writing. I'm also, I'm also a poet, I guess. Could call myself that, but that's how I view the world. I view the world through writing, through reading. So yeah.
I love it. I love the peacekeeper. I don't think I've ever heard you identify that way. So I appreciate you putting that into the space and also stepping completely to you being a writer. You're a phenomenal writer. I've definitely seen it. And fun fact, I've known Adela since I was 18. We met at camp. The first thing we said to each other was like, what's your sign and where do you live? And we both were Virgos and both from New York City. And it was like a lifelong friendship from there. So there's a way to build these bonds really quickly. And last but never least is Doug Sutherland.
Hello, Doug Sutherland, as it says here, originally from St. Louis, but now I'm living in New Hampshire. To continue what people have done, I've been like, how do I put this all together? So I'll just say, I'm a partner of Kate, a father of Della, a son of Jeanette, a brother of Maurice, a grandson of the late Laura and Charles, and a whole host of other cousins and sisters I don't know of. Father not around for I haven't seen in 30 years, something like that, but here I am. Something else you don't know about me is I would say that, let's see, one of my favorite things is just to watch my daughter grow, and I sneeze when I get dehydrated. There we go.
Yes, I love it. First of all, thank you. It's like poetry when y'all are speaking about your histories and where you're coming from. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And it's just testament to this panel that I feel like I have to reintroduce myself. I feel like it was so surface level, which could have been nerves or just thinking about other people's gaze. And so I'm gonna go back and reintroduce myself because you all share so much. So I'm the daughter of Ruth Gamble, who is now an ancestor. I am a foster child. I have 6 brothers and 2 sisters who were adopted. I grew up in the Bronx, but I've lived all throughout New York City. And yeah, I'm a petty troublemaker. And so I'm very, very excited for this panel. Thank y'all for sharing because it made me want to share more, which I wish more spaces had. So thank you. So before we get into the nitty gritty of the conversation, I would love for Liz, who's gonna read out the context. So you all received some of the context notes when you signed up, but she'll be reading the larger paragraph. I want to be transparent. I am dealing with allergies or a cold, so I'm a little nasally. So Liz stepped up and supported me in this moment. So I'll let you take it away.
Hello, everyone. So for many in the camping and outdoor education world, 2020 has shined a light on the need to reckon with race and camping in a way that has not been prioritized before. As a result, camp leaders have expressed their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, and anti-racism. Many have demonstrated this promise to create more inclusive camp environments by hiring DEI experts like Simone and anti-racism educators. Push to the fore conversations around the ways leaders can create camps that are inclusive of marginalized identities and work towards racial and economic equity. Although these efforts are a necessary and long overdue shift, we must have the conversation around what it means to decenter whiteness at our camps and the DEI work necessary to get us there. We must consider the ways we center the feelings and safety of white people with less focused on marginalized identities. More energy must be put into uncovering the specific needs of the most marginalized groups in order to understand how to implement structures and programming that truly safety, equity, and inclusion. Much of the work to create these camps has focused on educating white camp leaders about their biases and racism and not uncovering the specific needs of marginalized groups in order to understand how to commit to the structural changes necessary to create the camps BIPOC campers. In this session, we will center the voices of BIPOC camp leaders who will have a conversation in which we reimagine a camping world that centers the needs of BIPOC communities along with the DEI work necessary to make this a reality. We will have white allies only listen in and center the perspectives of those who work daily to advocate for marginalized identities. Some of the conversation may not be comfortable, but growth always happens outside of our comfort zones. So we hope you join us to listen and learn and then take action. This work can no longer be passive. We challenge you to step beyond the role of an ally and step confidently into being an accomplice. This webinar is directly inspired by the honest, bold, transformative work conversations held by Janice Usam Asare, author, DEI expert, in her article, Why DEI and Anti-Racism Work Needs to Decenter Whiteness, as well as the fireside chat titled Decentering Whiteness, led by Judy Ann Burre, disruptor, speaker, writer, and Yen Jin Lee, equity and justice coach.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I just want to definitely honor the folks who inspired this chat that Liz so beautifully read out. So I hope that I put it in the chat for you to read along as well and to reflect on as we have this conversation. So we're all on the same page. So we're gonna jump right into our panel discussion. Folks will flow in and out and we'll just let it flow as water. So our first question, let me put it up on the screen quickly, is how has camp shaped you as a person? So I'm gonna, just to give you a little bit behind the scenes, I'm gonna present the question so people can read it and take stock of what's being asked. But then I'm gonna stop the share so we can all engage with each other, fill out people's body language, because that's how we communicate, and then go from there. So this is the time for folks to focus on the beautiful pieces of camp, how it has impacted you in really powerful and positive ways and also critical ways. So I will stop the share now and allow folks to share their stories. Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and jump in. I was not a camp kid. I knew camp existed. I just never thought it was for me. I did other things during the summer, somewhat direct, well, kind of related to school, kind of. But what those programs did to me was to help me develop my passion to working with kids, even as a kid, going through high school and so forth. Camp kind of came about as, well, what else am I going to do? Which I would say a lot of staff members think that too. What else am I going to do this summer? But so I would start, when I became a staff member, that started my shaping for me anyway. And it basically did what I think most camps want to have happen with their staff if they're able to, is develop staff members and keep them around and keep them around and keep them around. Even though I stayed at one camp for 10 years, I'm sorry, 11 years. But, I think that's what, and I went from counselor to director, yeah, so it shaped me quite a bit. And now still I never thought I would be in camping this long. But then again, I didn't know what else I was going to do. But then I got here, and here I am, and executive director of Brentwood Camp. And, so it shaped me quite a bit. And even I want to just add just my, bringing up in our introductions, thinking about my grandparents, and the influence that they had on me going in this direction. It took me a while to realize that, but it wasn't because they were into camping, because they were not into camping. However, they did encourage me to, just try new things and do something different and see people for who they are, and, respect them for that. And a lot of things I saw them do was back then it was like, why do you do that? It's like, well, because she loved my grandmother, rest her soul. She just loved everyone, and she tried to do her best to love everyone. And, and I find that it's really hard, but I'm trying my best, and I want her to know that. And I do that by being at camp, and just doing what I can with who's around me to kind of spread that a little bit. Love is hard. Love is hard, and at camp it can be very hard, but we do it.
Yeah, I wasn't a camp kid either. But I knew about this particular camp because of a friend. And even though I wasn't a participant enrolled in this program, I got to be around adults who listened to me and made me feel important. And I'm like, but why? Why are they nice? Why are they hugging me? Why do they remember my name? And I remember wanting to be a part of that. And just mind you, I didn't have I didn't feel like I had a sense of purpose at a young age. I didn't feel like I couldn't imagine what my future looked like beyond high school. I really, really struggled with that. But being a part of camp has really given me the platform to use my voice and to shine bright and to be quirky and really step into my power. And not just as a direct service staff member, as a counselor, but even as a supervisor, manager, assistant camp director. So really camp has given me that platform to do that, to do those things.
I love the quirky. I just got to say that. I love the quirkiness with camp, and yeah, that's great. That's great.
I love the stepping into your power, because I've known Liz for some time, and she's always been power to me and so energizing. So I love that you are claiming that. So interesting. I feel like how camp has shaped me. One, I'll say this: whenever I speak, I tell people I'm not a camp person. I was not a camp person before coming into this industry, which may sound weird if you know some of my background and what I do in the ACA and such. People were my thing, and the best people were at camp. And I got to practice the social work that I was learning about in college and in my undergrad years. So people are my thing, and camp is kind of like the portal in which I get to experience people. So let me backtrack a little bit. How camp has shaped me is in a weird way. So interesting that we're talking about this topic. Camp formalized my racial equity work. I was a 19-year-old going to a predominantly white institution, and was in total culture shock when I left Brooklyn and going up to Albany and being around people who could pay their whole tuition and were just white and did not have a place for me. So when I came to camp and was introduced through their staff training to the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond and got to do their training, I was like, oh, what is happening? my experience is making sense. Okay, so white people have done things, and they should know that they've done things that impact me. And here I am at this camp with predominantly white leadership, and I don't even think they knew the magnitude of what they did by bringing in um, the People's Institute to train their staff. So my racial equity work was really formed at camp, at my camp. And that has, I think, just sprout. Now I think that has sprouted so many different avenues for me in doing DEI work and being a powerhouse within the ACA and doing different speaking engagements and things like this. So that's how camp has shaped me. I would say that I really took away, and I would not have been exposed to in this way, to grow me in this way if I had not gone to camp as a staff person. Speaking, kind of connecting with what Liz said, camp was like, it was like a place where people were kind and intentional and like cared, which was the total opposite of what I'd experienced in the world as a Black woman. So to come into the space and I'm like, okay, these really nice, well-intended white people, oh, y'all are like real, and you actually kind of understand that like anti-racism is a thing and you should be into that. So it made me just help to reimagine the world. So that camp wasn't just 3 months, but 365, that people could have camp all the time when talking about the intentionality of what camp does.
I think it's so interesting that us as BIPOC, we identify as not being camp people, right, in the beginning. And I think there's lots of reasons for that. I also didn't identify as a camp person. I wasn't a camp kid. As first gen, my summers were spent, my parents had us go back to Indonesia, right? We had to go back home and we had to know our culture and our roots. And that was where I spent my summers. And just like you, Akinyele, I also attended a predominantly white institution my freshman year at college. I think I struggled because of the culture shock so much. I was coming from a, inner city high school in Manhattan, and I struggled so much that I almost lost my scholarship. I was on academic probation, and I thought at one point, college isn't for me. This is just not for me. But like everyone else on this panel that just came before me, I was attracted, or I was drawn to working with people, with young people in particular. I guess in a camp setting. And so I did. And that summer after freshman year changed my entire life. And just like everyone else that I'd mentioned, a lot of it is because I felt seen. After a whole year in this predominantly white institution of, honestly, I don't know, I didn't feel like myself, but I think I didn't feel like myself because there was so much harm and violence in so many different ways that were also oppressive to not just myself, but I see everyone else on campus that also looked like me, right? I just felt like for the first time, we were also making, the campers feeling seen, but at the same time, I think the leadership we were a part of did a great job also making us feel seen, as well as everyone else. The camp staff, it was awesome. It was great. And so I loved it. And so by the time camp finished that summer, I cried the entire 6 hours ride home. I cried the entire way. And I remember one of the board members came up to me because I was crying. I was sobbing actually as I was getting on the bus, and he was like, you'll be fine. I'll see you next year. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I came back for 5 summers in a row. And eventually I ended up not being a camp director, but I ended up leading the teen section, I guess, of camp. So it was just life-changing for me. It was life-changing for me too.
Yeah, and I guess I'm the odd duck out because I was a camp kid throughout my entire childhood. I am the child of a first-generation immigrant. My mother is Filipino, and so both of my parents worked. And so during the summer when we weren't at school, my sister and I, they sent us to summer camp, a small wide day camp. And speaking similar to the experience of my fellow panelists here, it was really kind of the first time and place that I really felt seen and heard, because I went to a predominantly white elementary, then middle, high school, and university. And I just really had that unique experience and was able to kind of climb through the ranks and travel all over the country and experience what different camps in different regions of these United States has to offer. And I mean, I would not be the person I am today without camp and the outdoor recreation industry as a whole. I mean, it guided my capstone my senior year in college, was the participation disparity. And I didn't know it at the time, but in 2015, I would meet my future wife at summer camp, and our officiant was my boss at that camp. Like, and so it just, the power of camp and everything that it's been able to do for me has really been able to guide the work that I get to do now.
I love these stories. I'm just like beaming, but I also I'm not gonna answer every question, but this one I will. I wanna piggyback off of Jason and say that I am a camp kid as well. I grew up in the Bronx, and like I told you, we had like 8 siblings in the house. So my mother was like, y'all are not gonna be in this house all summer, especially in the Bronx. And so she sent us to day camps originally in our local, in the Catholic school that we attended, they had a day camp. And then eventually I really took to it as a young person. And so I graduated to the big leagues, I say, and went to sleepaway camp. But one thing about my mother was that we went to church every Sunday. So she was super religious. And so she was like, yeah, the camp that you go to is also gonna be religious. So I went to a lot of Christian camps where we would literally go to church on Sunday and then do like fun activities throughout the rest of the time. And then eventually secular camps after that. So I think I was super shaped by camp and eventually became a camp counselor myself because I just didn't get enough of it. It helped me to form my self-confidence. It helped me to relate to people and friendships. It helped me to also kind of break out of this mold of what it meant to be a little Black girl, because I like to dabble in so many different things. And I think camp allowed me to be expansive and make friends with people that I never thought I would meet. So for me, camp literally made me into the bubbly personality that I'm into now. And even though I'm awkward, I felt embraced in that space. And when I did go to camp, I just remember all my Black friends were like, that's white, like, why are you going to camp? And I'm like, camp isn't white, there's some Black people there too. Like, there's some of us there. Like, we need to be there. Yeah, a little bit, right. But honestly, it has changed my life. And the conversation we're gonna get into next is thinking about, yes, this beautiful utopia that we dream of when we think of camp. But as I dived into this DEI work, I had to really sit back and reflect on the spaces that may not have been so amazing, that may not have been as safe for me as a young Black girl, and how that impacted me. And so we're gonna get into your stories as I share the screen to talk about this idea of camp as a utopia, but us really diving into this question. So what is the difference between a safe space and a welcoming space, especially when it comes to camp? So we know that camp feels welcome for everyone. It feels like we're included, but how is that different from what a safe space looks like when we're talking about camp? And anyone can start.
I've changed the language over the course of the years to safer space because I'm just like really honing on words.
Absolutely. We can't assume that anything is completely safe. It could change at the drop.
Yeah. Because I started out as a counselor, I'm like, this is a safe space until something happened. And I'm like, dang, like it didn't safe after all, but definitely safer than the realities back at home. But the way that I distinguished this question was like a welcoming space. I think about a house. Like everything's so prim, look warm. People are by the door ready to greet you. They help, helping you take your shoes off, maybe giving you some socks so you're warm. Like everything feels really cozy and sometimes perfect, right? And enticing. But I think a safer space is that same house, but maybe everything isn't perfect, and that the things that would be swept under the rug, like you start to see that those things sip as like kind of, what is the word, like all the nooks and crannies in the home, right? But then you have people that acknowledge those nooks and crannies and like also say, we're not a perfect space, but like we want you to feel at home and we want you to feel welcomed and embrace and feel embraced in this space.
For me, I immediately thought, are we setting up the spaces for campers and camp staff to be surviving or thriving. And I feel like maybe safe spaces are, we're doing the bare minimum as camp staff to set up the environment for folks to survive, right? Just the basic stuff that we all know, we all do, it's routine. But I feel like if we're setting up the space for a welcoming space, that will enable campers to truly thrive and to truly come as their full self too, right? At interviews, you tend to perform a lot. And for me, it's like, okay, this is safe enough for me to perform, but sometimes you need permission, right? To be your full self from these, I guess, interviewers, right? I'm just giving an example here. And I think that permission is sometimes needed, right? And we're just not there yet as BIPOC. We're not there to come in as our full selves because we just don't know. We don't know, and we've been violated in so many ways that we can't trust all these spaces that folks claim as safer or safe to actually be safe. So if there's no safe space or safer space, then how is it going to actually be welcoming? So for me, it's about surviving versus thriving a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Adela and Liz. So I told you I'm like a budding poet, budding artist. So I see things sometimes in pictures. And when I think of safer space, I thought like literal, like a safe. So when you think of a safe, it's like this fortified structure that keeps things inside for
Oh, was that the Zoom?
what does that mean?
No, I think it was all of us. It was all of us. Look at them trying to stop this power.
Yeah.
It's always me. I'm telling you, it's always me. Listen.
No worries, AK. You can start off where you left off. You were saying
I
that
don't even know how much.
Like I say,
like a safe, yeah.
Okay. Is everyone back now? Can I get a thumbs up? People can hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. Right. So thinking about a safe that's keeping money, jewels, other resources that you want to keep and like have it in a fortified space, as opposed to like putting a welcome sign above that and saying, hey, take what you need. Come in. We want to see you. We want to hear you. We want you to thrive. Come and be a part of the resources that we have. What resources do you have that you can bring into this space? So I think when I think about a safe space, it's kind of like fortified for a specific group of people and identity. And when you say welcoming space, it's like bringing people into that and letting them know that we want you here and we're going to do whatever it takes to keep you here so that then you can start to be a part of this community and make it safer and braver and more equitable. So that's what I kind of think about as it pertains to safer space versus a welcoming space.
I love that. I think, in my years of working at camp, it's always thriving to make it safe, always thriving to, make sure it's welcoming for campers, staff members, visitors, board members, families, all that whole thing. But recently, well, not recently, I guess, one thing I realized is that camps are safe until they're not. And the problem is they're not safe if I, as a, director or as that camper feels that they're now no longer safe, then we can't say that camp is safe anymore, right? We can, oh no, I take that back. We can say it's safe as much as we want. We can say it's welcoming as much as we want. But what about that camper? What about that staff member? What about that board member? What about that family? If they don't think it's safe, are we really as safe and welcoming as we want to be? Which is hard, because how do I work with that one camper? How do I work with that one staff member? And also take care of an entire community that thinks we're safe and welcoming. It's like, well, it's just one camper or it's just one family. Yeah, but that's one camper, one family that could really use, need, want camp. So what I try to do is focus on that one camper, knowing that I don't know who that one camper is. or that one family, or who I don't know who they are. So I try to focus on the camper and kind of spread it out a little bit. Safe. Of course, I want camp to be welcoming. And as Liz said earlier, safer. That's what I go for. It's like, or as safe as possible. But I wish it could be. One thing I also thought about was, I like the house analogy, with the the nooks and crannies, right? There are a lot of kids that come to camp where it's too quiet. It's too dark, and we say, oh, it's fine, oh, the bugs are fine. Yeah, that howling in the outside your cabin, oh, it's fine. And every part inside me is like, there's a big monster outside. Like, oh, no, that's just the wolves, it'll be fine. And it's like, no. But when I'm at home and I hear sirens or gunshots, like, yeah, I don't want to hear that either, but I'm here, I'm as safe as I can be, I guess. And it's a different feeling maybe. But when they come to camp and they say, oh, it's fine, oh, it's okay, yeah, don't worry about it. It's like, yeah, I have a lot to worry about, and it's that howling going on outside because I haven't experienced that before. And you say that it's safe, like, yeah, but it's not, may not be safe to that camper or staff member because they're not used to that. So that's something we have to think about, I think, with this whole idea is taking it like, yes, you may think it's safe, but everything is telling me to run because I am in a place I don't know, it's dark, and there's howling outside, or there's these, what does that do? It's a cricket. I've never seen a cricket before. Like, okay, yes, you have. That's, how do we get past that, that feeling, of what is safe for me is safe for everyone else, and vice versa also.
That's such a good point. I love the idea around silence and equating that with being welcoming or safety or camp culture. And that brings up this fact around how so much of like camp norms and traditions are rooted in what makes white folks comfortable. And I think one moment, I remember I went to a camp and I visited, and there was like this open mic, and a part of the open mic, people were like playing acoustic guitar, singing, reading poetry. And I'm like, okay, this is cool. And then one of the norms of the space is that after people performed, that it would just be silent. Like there would be no snaps, no claps, no affirmations. It was just like a silent space. And then for me, I thought about that and I'm like, as a Black person, just in my experience, when I want to offer affirmation, I snap my fingers, I clap, I say, like I add noise. Yes, very verbal. And in that moment, I was like, this is your norm and not my norm. So in that way, I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel welcome. I couldn't feel like I can share my full self. And if I did, what would that judgment look like? So I think even in like the small nuances of like your traditions, are you really thinking about the larger community or just what has always been done and what makes you feel comfortable? I think in this work, if you feel uncomfortable, maybe you're actually doing something right. Does anybody want to add to that before we go to the next question?
And I think what contributes to like a safer space is like what's uncomfortable and the discomfort, right? How you acknowledge those uncomfortable times and work through them, right? So the example that I can think of is I don't like fireworks. I live in East New York, Brooklyn. Fireworks are really triggering, but like the 4th of July that happens at our camp and we go to watch the fireworks. And I'm like, I can't be the only one that's really triggered about this, right? So like, what can I do in that space knowing that that's my perspective on this for maybe other staffers or campers? Like, am I acknowledging, if I'm saying out loud, is there anyone who's cool with this right now? You want to take a walk? You want to talk about it? Maybe let's unpack why we're not feeling so good in this space. But with the safer space, I think it's like how we acknowledge discomfort in those spaces as well.
I love that. Did anyone else want to go before I went to the next question? Okay, cool. So the next question is because all of you are in some capacity, wherever you're working, are dedicated to creating safer spaces, in particular for BIPOC identities and other marginalized identities. But I want folks on the call to know and for us to share here around how this work has impacted you personally. Has it been something that has uplifted you? Is it your life's purpose? Is it something that is actually draining and wish you didn't have to do? I just want you to be as candid and honest as you can be about how thinking about creating safer spaces at your camp or outside of camp in your own workspaces, what that has looked like for you.
I
Yeah,
love this.
so-
Oh, go ahead, Jason. Go ahead, please. Yeah.
All right. So creating safer spaces at the camp that I'm currently director at, we are on a reservation, and so our population of campers is 92% indigenous. So the elements of creating a safer space at camp are very they're as heavy as like being inclusive of race. Like we're dealing with a lot of intergenerational poverty. We're dealing with a higher percentage of young female identifying people being trafficked and sexually assaulted and abused. And so creating those safer spaces is something that we've really prided ourselves on working on, but also it is exceptionally draining because of the implications of everything. We deal with a lot of food insecurity as well. And so like our campers, as part of their orientation tour, we take them and walk them through the kitchen while they're cooking and everything and show them our food stores to really show them like, no, you will get 3 hot meals. Like that is the level of intentionality and inclusion that we have to have, because sometimes these kids don't get 3 meals a day. Sometimes they don't get a meal a day. And so I'm always reminded of when we create safer spaces at camp, that we have kids, when we get them into our cabins for the first time, they will look at their bunk bed and just be like, wow, I've never had this. And so a lot of our staff will be like, what, bunk beds? And they go, no, a bed of my own. And so creating those spaces is extremely important. It's uplifting for me, but at the same time, it's extremely high pressure for us to be as good as we can be. And it's also extremely draining because of the implications. If you let your minds go down those rabbit holes, it gets really depressing really quick. And yeah, that's just my take on that.
Yeah, I love this question. I think it's, you know, everything I've, especially, let's just be honest, this year, my whole everything has been focused on camp. And, but when I think about personally what as far as the safer spaces, I think, I'll be honest with you, I think of my daughter, and, well, you don't know my daughter, but we live in, we live in Hancock, New Hampshire. And I just looked it up real quick just to make sure I was right. But it's about, let's say 1,800, maybe 1,900 people. Counting my daughter and myself, that's 6 people of color live in this town. And, she goes to school where there's one other kid, a BIPOC kid at the school. In the camping world, she basically has grown up. She's only 10, so it's not like she's like 21 or anything, but she's would be at least being around camp a little bit. Great camp up in Maine, and she had a great time. She actually spent time there without myself or my wife there, which was awesome, and she loved it. But there were a lot of white kids there. There were some black kids there. But I think back to when I took my daughter to visit my family in St. Louis, and well, a lot of things made her eyes like explode open. One was she was surprised by how green the grass was, because I think it was like fall here, or I'm sorry, spring here, or early spring, and the grass wasn't green yet. So the grass is so green. But the other thing was there were so many black people. Oh my goodness, she was just floored by that. And and thinking about that and where I work now, it's like, I don't know. Yeah, I want to live where I live, because I'm comfortable here. The school is great. My daughter loves it. I have friends here. You know, I like the area. You know, am I one of very few Black people? Yes, yes. But, you know, this is where I want to live. This is where I have the right to live, you know. And when I think about it for camp, you know, I want to try to bring all of that together, you know, and knowing that it's not going to be perfect. You know, there will be those little nooks and crannies, you know, and that we need to work through. But I look at it through the eyes of my daughter, just giving her that experience, seeing that look on her face, and seeing her uncle for the first time walk in through the doors at the hotel, and she's like this big smile on her face, and I didn't see him, right? But she saw him, and she just lit up. This beautiful Black man walking in, and she's looking right at her, because I didn't, like I said, I didn't see him. And then he was like, I looked down, I'm like, what are you doing? And I look over, and there my brother was. And so I mean, it was, you know, that's what I want to have happen for kids at camp, just to be, you know, to light up, you know, for whatever it is, not because they looked at my brother. I mean, I'm sure he might be good to look at, but I don't know. Anyway, but to just light up and be a part of that community, and just enjoy being with each other, and not just BIPOC kids, with all people, you know, that come to that camp to have that same experience, you know, and have it. Yeah, you're a part of this community, white, BIPOC. This community is what we want it to be. Well, let's make it that way. Let's not wait for it to happen. Let's not, you know, just let's do it. And that's what's going to make us a safer space, and try and do our best to support everyone as much as we can. The nooks and crannies. I wrote that down, by the way, because I like the whole nooks and crannies idea. You know, because I know my daughter is not going to, you know, have everything she wants. She has asked for everything. She wants a horse, for Christ's sakes. But she's not going to get everything, but to at least try to give her a little bit of something, and to see that look on her face as she saw when she met my brother for the first time. It was just so heartwarming. And I just want to do that for all the campers, you know, all the staff members that come to camp, just that little bit of something. And maybe it is a sunset, maybe it is seeing a beaver for the first time, maybe it is, you know, making that friend that they didn't think they were going to make at camp, you know, and now they've been friends for 20 years. I don't know. Let's do it. Let's try it out.
I just wanted to lift that, Doug. I did virtually meet Della, and I want to lift her in this space because she is an energy. Yes. And she deserves all the things she asked for from you. Tell her I said that. Okay?
I will not tell her you said that. I will not.
But Della is an energy. I want to lift her in this space. I do remember her, and she's going far. She's going far.
Thank you.
But getting back to how creating safer spaces has impacted me personally, I'm working year round. Our organization is year round. We have year round programming, and then in the summer we do residential camp. It went from awkward to unapologetic for me. I'm the only Black person, the only Black woman at my org, from the board to direct service. We're small. And at first it was awkward. I have my white leadership who's like, we're anti-racist in our personal lives, we're doing the work. You know, we know that it's important, to me being like, okay, bet, we anti-racist, let's have real conversations. I'm the only Black person here. Let's talk about what that means for me. I know we have a diverse team with Latinx folks, but I am the only person in this identity. And what weight does that cause me to have to hold? So in the beginning, it was awkward of like, hey, simple things, not simple, but like when someone addresses the group as, hey, you guys, and I'm like, hey, like everyone, how can we be more gender inclusive? So those awkward moments of not doing the hey, you guys, to like, you know, I am she, her, I'm a cis woman, so I have some privileges, but I need to acknowledge the fact that I need to be an accomplice to my queer friends, my friends who identify outside of the binary. So those awkward moments, to unapologetically in 2021 saying, you know, to my supervisor, I'm not comfortable going to the next gala because I'm going to be one of the people that is in a room full of white, well-intended rich folks that's going to ask me, have I been a camper before? Instead of acknowledging who I am and the work that I've put in this organization. So it went from awkward to unapologetic. And I have to be unapologetic because my life depends on it. And the same things I advocate for myself, I'm advocating for the kids that I'm serving, whether they identify as Black or part of the expansive community of people of color. So personally, went from awkward to unapologetic. I'm going to continue to move into unapologetics, because if you say you want to be anti-racist and you're saying it to me as your staff person, then I'm going to hold you accountable. And luckily at my org, they're I guess moving into the uncomfortability around, wow, we have to continue to do this work. We can't just sit and pat ourselves on the back like, oh, we're doing a lot of great things, which we are. It still ain't enough. And I'm gonna keep being the squeaky wheel to say we ain't doing enough, we ain't doing enough, we ain't doing enough. So yeah, awkward to unapologetic is how it has impacted me personally, creating these safer spaces.
I need that on a t-shirt.
Me too. So I think for me, I also think of my daughter, my 6-year-old. She's attending a day camp at our local YMCA this summer, and it's her first time. She's attended that YMCA before for universal pre-K, and we loved it. We loved it. We loved all her teachers. There were basically no white people and maybe like one white student and one white family, but that was universal pre-K, which is free, right? And now this camp, I mean, you know, they raised the rates for the camp, right? Which is understandable given what's happening in the economy. And so, you know, one of my best friends was a camp director at the YMCA at Flushing for many, many years, I think like 10 years or something. And she's not sending her children to camp. And so I'm wondering, like, I wonder why, right? But what she didn't tell me was she didn't feel like, and maybe that was her experience, but she didn't know if it was going to be a safe enough space for her daughter, right? Her daughter is white passing. They're Colombian, but they're all pretty much white passing, according to her. And so, you know, I think with that comes a lot of privileges, right? And so she wanted her daughter to learn more about Colombian culture during the summer, right? So maybe traveling more to Colombia, whatever it is. But for me, I think I don't know what to expect as a parent. I know there are some camp directors on here that are attending. I'm not sure what to expect. I'm not sure even what my expectations are, right? I mean, I have my expectations, but I just hope for my daughter to feel included, to feel validated and affirmed in her identity, right? She's half Bengali, half Indonesian, she's Muslim. And so all of these identities, she sees it play out in the household. She sees it plays out in our neighborhood, because our neighborhood is mostly also Bengali and West Indian and Muslim and Hindu. But when we go into camp, I don't know if that's going to be a space that is like that, right? And I don't know, sometimes I feel like I don't know if I've equipped her enough with the tools, the language. I know she's only 6, but you know, this is what you think of as a parent, right? Like, did you teach them enough? Like, does she know not to say any ethnic slurs, which, you know, definitely not, but you just wonder as a parent, because you also wonder about what she's hearing from other children. And so for me, it's a lot of worry, right? And it's not just camp, but it's also her school, right? Her school are run by white folks, even though they're in a Black and brown community, they're run by white folks, but there's also a lot of BIPOC that attend. It's mostly BIPOC. And so it's folks that look like her, folks that also celebrate Ramadan and Eid and Diwali and all of those holidays. So it feels like home to her, and it feels like home to us too. You know, we can talk to the parents a lot, but I think maybe I'm just projecting my worries as a first-time parent who's sending her kid to camp is, what am I, you know, I've been wanting to meet the director, but everything is virtual, and we don't work well virtually. My daughter hates remote learning. I don't like anything remote, you know. I mean, conversations like this, they're different, but it's just not how we relate to people. It's just not how our people relate to people. We need to be in person. I need to see the body, right? I need to see the body so that I know how to react and I know when to jump in. It's hard, right? And so, you know, when I spoke to the camp director, he's like, yeah, you know, we'll meet you on the first day of camp. No. Hold on. So I think we're going to meet him sometime in May, because I had to push for it. And I was like, is there a way that I can just say hi and come into the Y real quick, drop off some forms? You know, I use that as an excuse. I just needed to see for myself and feel more comfortable as a parent. And I think for me, just him allowing that, just him saying, okay, yeah, this that's a possibility, you know, we'll work with you on that. That's created a safer space, but you know, I can only imagine some parents who wanted that but wasn't able to push for it, right? And so I'm thinking about those parents too.
You bring up something that's especially when it comes to like your kids. And one thing that I've thought about with my daughter is she knows what not to say, but does she know how to react when someone says it to her? Right. And if it's said to her, one of my biggest fears is not for her to necessarily respond, but how are those that are taking care of my daughter going to respond? Are they going to stop and then look at my daughter and expect her to respond to someone calling her a derogatory name because they don't know how to deal with it, you know, which is my expectation, that they're going to stop and look at her and like, and see, are you okay with them calling you that? And like, what do you want her to say? You know, you know, so now is it my job? And I do believe it's my job, but how to help her understand that when this happens, this is what you do, you know? And part of it is if it happens, you go talk to someone. But if that person doesn't know what to do and won't listen to my daughter or dismisses it, that's what makes it hard. Like, okay, so I don't want that to happen at the camp that I work at. You know, I want them to have an out, you know, not an out, but a way, know what to say. No, and to, I guess what is, I need them to act, you know, on behalf of my daughter. You know, I don't want my daughter trying to figure out what to do. You're the one that got all this training. You're the one that needs to say something and stand up with my daughter, you know, and give her or help her find her voice or give her the voice or be the voice that she doesn't have right now, you know, because that's what you're supposed to do, not because you're afraid, you know. So I feel you know, it is something I think that, at least for myself, I think about things that I have no control over sending my daughter to camp. It's just a big hope. And I like that you advocated for yourself. You're like, no, we're going to meet, because every other family out there does that. All those white families like, no, you need to know that my kid is this way. You know, yeah, maybe my daughter's coming on scholarship, so I shouldn't say anything, but I'm going to say something anyway. You know, it's like, it's none of this, I'm not paying that much, so I shouldn't. No, you advocate for your family. You advocate for your kids. And I expect phone calls. I've gotten phone calls from family like, we need to talk. I'm like, yes, we do. Yes, we do. You know, so yeah, I think that's, yeah, definitely speaking up for the ones that can't or won't or shouldn't have to, I guess, is what it comes down to for me.
If it's okay to jump in this question, like what you said about advocating hit me hard, and that's how camp has impacted me personally. What I wrote down for this question was like, be ready and like stay ready, because yes, like Adela mentioned, camp is a place to feel seen. Yes, I've stepped into my power and there was a platform given to me, but sometimes even though you're seen, you're not always heard. And what I realized is sometimes camps can do this counterintuitive thing where they're like, yeah, like jump, shout, like make your voice heard. If you're feeling something, please let someone know. And on the incident, they're not always ready to hear what someone has to say. So how is this helping me as a camper, or me as a staff member, or me as a supervisor? You know, what I learned was, yes, I was put into position so that I could advocate for the young people, advocate for the staff. But it was the times when my voice wasn't ready to be heard that I just felt like a notch down. I was like, damn, why am I doing this to myself? And like AK said, it's that responsibility that you have for your community, like that ties you to this work. And that's a lot to hold on to. That's exhausting. That's simply exhausting. And I think that's what's impacted me, is like, I'm gonna be a disruptor now because I love this work so much and I'm so passionate about camp as an institution. And I do think it can impact and change lives, but you can't expect people like the folks on this call to want to be in positions of power when you're not ready to hear what they have to say. And when you do, like, you don't act quick enough. You use surfacey language to acknowledge what they're saying, and there's no result. There's nothing that comes from that. So I think what's impacted personally, middle manager, and being a middle manager in a space where my superiors are white and the people that I supervise are BIPOC and the young people that we serve are BIPOC and white. And it's tough because you always feel like you have to balance between, not just in a middle management position, but you always have to balance between what your superiors want and what your community needs. And you're balancing, like, am I making the right decision? Is it an informed decision? Am I listening to my intuition and doing what's right? Am I leading in ways that center around whiteness and anti-Blackness? And like, there was sometimes I have, and I'm like, nah, bro, like, that's not what I'm in here for. But it's in those mirror moments that I'm like, okay, next time, I'm gonna choose something different. I'm gonna say something different. I'm gonna move different. But I hate that it always feels that way. You know what I mean? So for me, how it's impacted me personally is I got to be a part of this work a lot more. I got to see all the different sides of it, and that's been great. It's really pushed me to want to pursue this, which is why I'm going back to school. But it's also to heal, because when you're put in a position of a supervisory position, again, working with your community, leading BIPOC folk like you, and you're constantly put in a position where like you're being challenged and you feel like it's centered on your identity, like that's hard. That's super hard. Yeah, so I guess my takeaway is, don't push people to like use their voice, uplift their voice, and make their voice heard if you're ready for their voice. If you're not ready, because that feels unsafe.
Absolutely. And I'm getting chills. Absolutely. I think I feel that completely. And even though I'm not working at a camp right now or in a certain position, the work that I do outside of with camps and through DEI consulting has been very interesting. And so it's been a really empowering space because I'm like, oh, we're starting these conversations that should have happened a long time ago, but it's happening now. So it's been like, okay, we're making progress. People are taking steps. They're ready. But then it also has been extremely draining because a lot of the folks on this call I've known for a long time, and they've started these conversations way before I even jumped on the scene. And so it's like, how are we still here? Why are we still in this position when people knew these were issues for years? And so it's frustrating in that place where we're still at the point of like asking folks to use their pronouns. And so it's for me, as an organizer, I know that I have to move with the collective mass, but sometimes it gets really hard to be patient when a lot of the changes that are necessary are contingent on your safety. Like if you don't do these things, I will not be safe. So for me, it doesn't seem like this can be something you wait till next summer to do. It has to be now. It has to be instant because my safety and the safety of people who look like me and us on this call is at risk if we don't do it right away. So it's been extremely uplifting. I'm learning so much. I'm connecting with people like you all on the call, which is uplifting, but also draining where you're just like, this is a lot. This is a lot. And you have to deal with the world, how the world sees you, violence, it's a lot. So that's why we're having this conversation also to be like, we need y'all to move a little quicker to take a little bit of the burden off of us as well. Because it's a lot to be directly impacted and the teacher at the same time. So let me go to the next, AK faces. I love it. I'm gonna go to the next question real quick. So this is on the question of diversity. So a lot of people are like, we need a diverse camp, we need diverse campers, we need diverse staff. But we want to talk about what it looks like if we center this conversation around diversity and actually talking about how it benefits BIPOC populations and not just white campers. So anyone can jumpstart this conversation. This one is a question that I haven't heard myself before this panel and interested to get into.
Yeah, so as a brown man in camping, which is a predominantly white field. A lot of people, a lot of conversations with white colleagues that I've had start off like with how do we become diverse? Like, how do we become a diverse camp? And I always shoot back with, well, why do you want to be a diverse camp? And that kind of gets them off their feet a little bit. And then the answer is inevitably, well, we want to give our current campers a more diverse experience and teach them how to interact with different people, which is great. That's a great answer. However, that centers your current population, which is predominantly white. And so reframing the answer to why do you want to be a diverse camp to reframing it and centering BIPOC communities and voices kind of looks like, for me at least, well, we as a camp do extremely good work and we want to bring in people that aren't here and we want to give them that experience. And just that shift of how they answer that question really is indicative of their journey down the road of being truly anti-racist and a diverse organization.
I think I think let me say in the past I will always say, you know, things like, of course of course you have a diverse camp. Everyone's not the same, you know. So and I think that's overall true. But when it comes to doing this type of work and you know, I wrote down, you know, give them the experience, and we think that, you know, camp is that experience that everyone should have. And believe me, I would love for everyone to experience camp at least once, you know, and then they can say, you know what, I'm never doing that again. Like my wife, she married a camp director. There you go. But she never wants to, you know, experience camp as a camper. But you know, what is so special about this experience? Right? What is so, you know, yeah, it's camp. You know, can I get this experience somewhere else? Yeah, maybe, but you know, but it's camp. And like, well, I get that it's camp, but they're coming to a camp, let's say, and for the most part, you know, camp, a BIPOC person coming to a camp that's surrounded by white people, or you know, and they're surrounded by white people, right? So it's like, well, that's a great. So I'm getting the experience of being at camp and doing, you know, those things that white people do at camp, you know, that's what they're seeing. But then they also get there and they may also see other folks that look like them. And then they have that connection with them and those other BIPOC folks. But then they have, you know, the white folks saying, how come they're not hanging out with us? You know, so I think that's what you were saying, you know, Jason, as far as, you know, they're not, you know, it's about us. They should hang out with us, you know, but they should be more inclusive. It's like, wait, what? You know, do you see where you're sitting right now? You have all white people around you, you know, that no one said anything to you. Right. So, you know, it is making that shift. Maybe it's not around BIPOC, but maybe it's just shifting. Like maybe they just want to hang out with people that look like them, you know, just for a little bit. It's free time. Let them be free, you know, to do what they want to do and not worry so much about, well, they're not hanging out with us, you know. And I almost said that in kind of like way, and I didn't mean that, but maybe I did too. Like, I want them to hang out with us. We want to be diverse. We want to be inclusive. And in order to do that, I need to take this picture of a diverse group of kids sitting together, right? It's like, so you want them over here. Why? To prove that you're diverse, to have these white kids feel more comfortable. Like, what is it, you know, and really define what that is. I mean, and just be honest about it. I think that's what it comes down to. Just be honest, because then you have a direction to go in. Don't do it because just be honest about it, you know. Like, yeah, we want more pictures on our website. Okay, all right, so why? Like, then we can deal with that, as opposed to we just want a diverse camp, you know. We want, you know, if it's because you want the white kids to have the experience of being around BIPOC kids, okay, let's deal with that. And don't tell me what I want, you think what I want to hear. Tell me your truth, and then let's work on that and adjust, raise up, push down, whatever it is, but let's deal with the actual thing that's going on. But decentering, or centering, I'm going to say, centering BIPOC folks is just, I think when I first saw this question, I was like, I don't even know, because I mean, that's a whole thought process shift right there, right? Because I didn't grow up in it, but I've had about 20 years in camping, and whoa, it just really getting down to it and really looking at the bones of it is hard. But it's not impossible. It is shifting your thinking and asking yourself that question, like, okay, so we always do this. Okay, what if we did this? Whoa, that's not camp. Wait a minute. It can be camp because we are camp. We do this together and we can make this happen if you want it to, right? So I think that's, it's like it is a shift, but we can do it. We can do it, and just see what happens. And maybe camp is a safer place. Maybe camp is a more welcoming place. And isn't that what camp is supposed to be anyway? So
I just wanted to, when you said like just tell the truth, it kind of like triggered me because trying to think of how I want to say this. It's the hardest. People don't know themselves well enough to be able to tell the truth about why they feel what they feel. And that's for professional, personally, just in general. And I think my prayer and hope is that during this time of like, I call it consecration during this pandemic, people have had to sit with their truth. Why do I feel that way about this community? Why do I feel that way about this community? Why do I feel this way about this identity? But the reason why I'm even having these conversations is, well, for me, is to challenge people to like examine your truth, examine your implicit biases, and examine, we talked about it, uncomfortability, so that you can have a more intentional conversation with with your staff, with your campers, with your year-round team. But I think the challenge is white people haven't always had to live in truths, right? They've had the power to look over some of those things. They've been immersed in perfectionism and not having to really different, because the world has been created around them, and uplifting whatever facade may have been presented through the power dynamic that has allowed for white supremacy and the centering of white reality. So to say tell the truth is such a loaded thing, um, because people don't know themselves well enough to tell the truth. And that's why we have to continue to have these type of conversations where people are listening and wanting to listen, and then sitting in the uncomfortability so they can really examine what's true for me. Why am I mad about why all the Black kids are sitting together in the cafeteria? That's also a pretty dope book if anyone's interested. But yeah, thank you for offering that. And it just made me, in that moment, I was like, no, I got to say something, because we can say tell the truth all day long, but we have to say, like, examine why you can't tell the truth. Know who you love so that you can stand firm in the truth and be able to have that dialogue. Because our kids, our staff, the world deserves that level of authenticity.
I think white supremacy is so insidious. It filters in our lives in so many ways. And I know for myself, I definitely uphold a lot of white supremacist values, perfectionism, sense of urgency, time. I'm always on time. That's definitely a white supremacy thing. So, I mean, if you're not on time, I wouldn't be in positions where I am now in my career if I didn't uphold, I think, a lot of those things, right? And so for me, I think when we're centering BIPOC experiences, what does that really mean? The first thing, for some reason, the first thing I thought of that came to my mind instinctually and viscerally was art. It was art. And I think I say art because I'm thinking about my lineage, my husband's lineage. There's a lot of poets on his side, a lot of dancers, a lot of like freehand artists. And there's poets on our side, peacemakers. My grandmother kept circles, and she supported the community in that way. And I didn't understand it as when I was young. But I think to me, it's how we relate to one another, right? We relate to one another through the art, through the poetry, through the peace keeping circles, through the water, right? My father grew up in the island of Kalimantan, which is surrounded by water. So we ate a lot of fish growing up. And it's funny because now none of us know how to swim, but he just knew how to swim because he had no choice, right? He grew up in the water. And so for me, it's honoring those stories, those journeys and experiences. And I'm grateful that the summers that we spent going back to Indonesia were the summers that my parents made sure we knew who we were and where we came from. And that's solidified, I think, who I am and my purpose and my very existence and why I do what I do. And, you know, we haven't been able to afford that same opportunity for our children for many reasons. I want to, but it does get expensive flying to not just Indonesia, but now to Bangladesh, right? Especially, you know, during COVID, I think it's not the greatest idea too. But for some reason that came up to me, right? Is just art, and how do we honor how BIPOC relate to one another, right? Apart from all these white supremacist experiences that we're always immersed in, sometimes I catch myself and I have to check myself, like, what am I doing? Like, you know, we talk, you know, at my job, I came in like one day, I was working out and I came in one day and I was going to change, but I came in one day in my yoga pants and my boss was like, yeah, no, that's gotta go. And I was like, yes, I know. And I was like, wait a minute, are you upholding a white supremacist standard of professionalism? And what does professionalism mean to you? And why does it have to center around how I look and what I look like, right? I still, you know, my brain is still the same. That hasn't changed. So I didn't even get into that conversation with her because it was 9 a.m. and we had students waiting. And so I was like, but this is what we need to do, right? Why can't I come in as my full self? And they see that I'm a whole person coming in after working out, because that's the only time I have as a mom in the morning, coming in, working out, then going to work, right? But I think I'm just rambling now, but those are the very first things that have come to my mind.
I think I'm gonna jump in. Did anyone else want to answer this question before I share out? No worries. Oh, Liz, were you gonna say something?
Yeah. Oh geez. So I was gonna say, like, changing the use of leader and leadership, because I think that is centered on like whiteness, and maybe choosing words like act intentionally with integrity, and then you can explain what that means, because then I feel like that connects a little bit what we were saying about truth and like and what it really means to be a leader, right? It's not to necessarily be perfect all the time. It's sometimes challenging decisions made when they're uncomfortable and acting with integrity. So I wonder like how that can look at certain camps, if like, why don't we if we still want to keep leadership, like why don't we outline that a little more clearly for our young people in our staff so they can act with intentionality and integrity, or maybe change it in general. I don't know. Camp 2021.
Yes. I think what came up for me with this question, I agree with Doug, when even just this conversation of censoring BIPOC folks, I'm like, how the heck do we do that? Like, even in the conversation when I first started thinking about it, the title was Decentering Whiteness. And I think Sarah pointed out, like, you're still centering whiteness in the title. And so we switched the name. So it's such a big shift for folks because that hasn't been the case. But what came up for me around this question of diversity and your why, I think people really need to analyze their why. Why are you having more BIPOC campers? Why do you want more BIPOC staff and leadership? Is it to check a box? Is it for them to be a token? Is it for you to look like a safer space and virtue signal? Or is this truly because you think they're gonna add something to the space? And an example that I thought of that kind of connects really well is I work in a social work school right now. And there was a class where we were talking about how we've grown and things like that. And one of the white social workers was saying like, I'm so lucky to be working in Black and brown communities. I'm learning and growing so much. And I had to pause and I'm like, hold up, let me, let's go back a little bit. What do you mean by that? And they were like, yeah, I feel like I'm learning so many skills. And then they're teaching me how to be a better social worker. And I think we need to be mindful that diversity is not a teaching tool. We are not teaching tools. We are people, we bring our own experiences, but we're not here for your development and growth and development of your conscience and morality. And I think if that's what your intention is to bring more BIPOC staff and campers into your space, that is very violent and it'll show up in your programs. Because when you fully see people as full humans and adding to something, then you are going to cater to them. They're not just pieces in a puzzle to fit a certain quota. So I'm glad that you brought that up because we need to analyze that because we're not really doing great DEI work if you're just focusing on bodies and not the humanity behind that. The world already does that. So it leads us to our next question, which is a doozy. It's because a lot of our camps are white-led, not all. A lot of them have a majority white leadership or white board. What is it, can we have true equity and inclusion without diversity? So if you do have an all white leadership and board or majority campers are white, can you have true equity and inclusion? Because a lot of folks are actually tackling this work, but may not have the diversity right now. So what are your thoughts on that?
This was the one question that I was like, ooh, huh. And I'm not looking for the right answer. I'm gonna say what's true for me, what's coming up for me. This is a yes and no. Because when I think about when I've spoken at different conferences and people ask like, well, if our whole camp is white campers and we only have white staff, like, do we need to be having these conversations? And I'm just always like, do you hear the words coming out of your mouth? And just let that settle in your spirit. Now, I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. I think diversity, I think, is essential to our existence in the world. We need that, the wisdom that is there, the resources that is there in diversity we need. But when you have like kind of like a monolithic camp, everybody's white, right? Everybody white and rich, great. If you focus on equity and inclusion, that means you have to focus on yourself and knowing yourself, telling yourself the truth and knowing your identity. And in that is so much power. It's so much life that would make it, for me, a little bit easier to include diversity once you in your white rich bubble have acknowledged your different identities. Who are your ancestors, right? What countries do they come from, right? How are you oppressed and how are you upholding oppression, right? Bring that together because equity and inclusion is about seeing people. And even if y'all all white and all rich, y'all still don't be seeing each other because you're not telling the truth about who you are. You don't take the time to figure out who you are beyond white supremacy and the privileges granted you here in America. So I think you can't have equity and inclusion without diversity. I don't think that's beneficial. We don't want that, but it can happen. And in your all camps, honor your own identities. But that's going to take you actually having to dig into your history and own some of those things and tell the truth and ask questions from your people around you. And then it's gonna be natural to say, I see you, right? It's gonna be natural to say, you know what, please call me they, them, right? Or it's going to be natural to say, you know what, I like this kind of culture, this food from Ireland better than this food that we've been traditionally serving, hot dogs and hamburgers here at camp. So for me, it's all about owning and honing into who you are as an individual, which would allow equity and inclusion, even if you're like a monolith kind of camp, so that when you do have campers who identify outside of that, when you do have staff who identify outside of that, it's already been a part of your culture to talk about identity and know your truth so you can say what you mean and really have understanding and also be open to correction around some of your assumptions and your implicit biases. So for me, this is a yes and no. And in an ideal world, diversity would be everything because of the wisdom and the resource that is going to bring.
I want to add to that too, and say that, yeah, so if you have those folks at your camp that they feel welcomed, safer. However, I also want to take that a step further and say, like, the whole point of camps, I think it's in the mission almost all the time, which is like to have these young people, work with them to uplift themselves so that they can take what they've learned to uplift their community. So if it is just all white kids, I like, hopefully, maybe this is a general assumption, but like Utah, like they can uplift other white folks and not like do the work and to understand their privileges as well. And continue to pay the work forward, right? Because I feel like that's the hard camp, is to like work with young people, help them understand that they do have agency, that words do matter, they have power. So like, why not, you know, why not bring them closer to understanding their own privileges and work through that?
I think critical self-reflection is key. I think that's critical in the work that everyone does, especially white folks. And I also think it's worth examining their relationship to power, right? If you want to create an equitable and inclusive space, you're going to have to give up some of that power too, right? And so I know that, Liz, you were talking about leadership and leading, and yes, that is definitely a white supremacist value, right? Again, we as BIPOC, we relate to each other, not in those hierarchical structures, but more in collectivist norms, right? Like peacemaking circles, right? That's how we relate to each other. We all hold value and we all hold wisdom intergenerationally in so many ways. But the challenge is, what does power look like? And what does it mean to give up that power? And I think white folks just aren't ready for that. They just aren't. You know, the other day, yesterday was Mother's Day, right? Yesterday, I drove through, I forgot where we were going, but we had driven through, you know, a predominantly white area on the way to like the mall or something. And I think we took a detour. We do this sometimes just to, you know, kind of like imagine, but we're taking a detour and we were looking at all these mansions and we're like, wow. And my husband, you know, he's like an auto mechanic, and he used to work with a dealership, and they were, you know, white folks who were owning the dealership. And he was like, look, this was my old boss's house. That shit was so, like, I could not imagine something as huge, and like, why do you need that much space? But anyway, I thought about it afterwards, and I was like, they're never going to give up their power. They would never give that up. What we just saw, what are we doing this for, right? And I was like, man, sometimes I feel so hopeless, right? Like I feel so like this, we're not going to be able to see the fruits of our labor. I think this generation, I know that. But I think what we're doing this for is for the future generations to, one, be equipped with the language, with the experiences, with the know-how to be able to, when it all falls, because it will fall, when it all falls, for them to be able to have or reimagine a different society, a new society. And so for me, power was a central theme this weekend for me. And just seeing that, and just, you know, it's different when we talk about it. When I saw it yesterday, I was like, they're not going to give that up. Why would you give up that kind of living? And he would talk about the kinds of parties that he would, you know, he worked in the dealership, but they used him to do all the grunt work, basically, and said, you know, just get some of the guys from the dealership and set up some tents for my party, right? And so just stuff like that. But it just made me think that the power that folks hold, I think, is really hard to give up, because it affords them certain privileges that most people don't have. And when you have that kind of privilege and you've tasted it and you've seen it, you're going to do everything in your power to hold on to it. So I think it's worth examining your relationship with power and see where you stand with it and how you can give it up to BIPOC folks.
Yeah, Adela, you're spot on with that point about power. I mean, especially in institutions that were made by and for white folks. So like, I'm with the Y, and I mean, the Y was made in England for white folks, and it came over here 4 white folks in Boston. And then why camping, where I'm at right now, was made for white folks. And so those, like, the very structure of this organization is so, for me at least, is just so ingrained, like, by and for white folks. And so that idea of people not wanting to give up power in the institution that allows them to fail upward, I'm with you, Adela. Like, it sometimes feels a little bit hopeless, like, as a brown man trying to be in this space, especially with the Y, like, I have to be so much more than some of my white counterparts. Like, I have to do so much more to check all the boxes that they just inherently check. And then when they fail, they get to fail upward. When I fail, I have to start over. And you're absolutely right with and for me, what I've always told people is, like, they're not going to change the system that benefits them. It has to fall. And that's not something I'm looking forward to, because that means a whole heck of a lot of rebuilding and a whole heck of a lot of trauma for everyone. And so I'm not looking forward to that. Let me be very clear. But it's going to be a time of change that needs to happen and has been a long time coming.
Like AK, this question kind of just, and I'm thinking about it, I realized that, let me put on a different hat. Someone that has been in this field for a long time, with mentors and people I look up to, and I've learned from, that are white, and answer the question as that person. It's a different answer, I think, for me personally. And I want to say, yes, of course, right? Camp can be equitable. Camp can be inclusive, even if we're not, at least the visual diversity isn't there. Yes, of course we can do that. The other side of me, myself, and taking what those people have taught me and taking it into myself, I was like, well, no, because it's all a part of the same thing. And at least it's a goal of mine, right? It's to have those 3 things be together, and to have that richness that diversity will bring to the equity, richness that diversity will bring to the inclusion, not just for me and how I want to see camp, but also to that camper and to that staff member and to that camper that becomes a staff member, and to that staff member that goes out to get a real job, and they've worked with it, they've seen it, they have lived with it. That's what we say that camps give staff members, those first time, your first job, if that first job is surrounded by, white folks all the time, and then they go to a place where they're not surrounded by white folks, it's gonna, so how great was that experience? So, I think you need the diversity in order for the inclusion and the equity to be, there we go, couldn't say all that together, in order for it to be truly truly what it is. For DEI to work, I feel like those things should be together. And now that, add into it justice also, great. You need those things together in order for it to really be something that's life-changing. Equity's great, inclusion's great, diversity's great, but you put those 3 things together, you have a superpower. Your camp is doing something really amazing. Your organization is doing something that is truly going to change the world. Your business is, it can be great. So yeah, can you do it? Sure. I was like, yeah, you could do it. But what if you did add diversity to it? What if? Just imagine. And maybe, I was also thinking about, with everything that's going on this year, maybe this year isn't the year, and maybe it isn't. And I totally I understand. I don't have to like it, but I understand that there's a lot, believe me, there's a lot to focus on this year. But I also tell myself and I tell others that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. But maybe some people have to walk slower. I get it, but at least you're walking. At least you're walking. And maybe it's, maybe it's not, you're not chewing bubble gum, you're just chewing on a mint. Fine, but do something, just even just a little bit, and then find out. Talk to people. If it's talking to a consultant beforehand, talk to your staff when they get there. Talk to your campers. For goodness sakes, talk to your campers. Because I can tell you from personal experience that the campers, especially the campers, don't say anything. Because why? Because you're diverse campers, they don't want to rock the boat, so they don't say anything to you. But have you tried to ask? Ask, ask their parents even, talk to the staff, and if they say, yeah, this place is horrible with diversity, don't get pissed off about it. Say, thank you for letting me know. It's something we're working on, and work on it. And those staff members, those campers may never come back. And yep, that's true. But doesn't mean you stop working on it. You keep working to do better. And I think that's where the diversity piece comes in even more. This summer, if you're like, we're going to do all this stuff, I attended so many webinars and workshops. Here we go. Yeah. And the kid's like, yeah, I don't want to come here anymore. Like, but I went to a webinar, like, yep. Yeah, I'm not going to do it. And then you start over again. You do something else, because that's where I think that's where the work really starts to pay off, is that, I know I don't have all the answers, and I'm not trying to have all the answers, but I'm trying to have an answer, at least for me right now. And then I can change. And that's where we are right now, I think, with camping, is that we have to change. We have to change our thinking. We have to change what we're doing, and not just let it be, well, we've been around for 100 years. We're good. Right? We're good. Like, if you want to change, go do it. Do it now, or, in a week or in a month, just try it out. Because then at least I think that diversity piece, those campers, those staff members see that you're doing something, as opposed to, we're providing camp for everyone. Like, are you providing camp for me? Or do you see me as a staff member, as a camper, as a family, do you see me as at this camp? And I think that carries a lot of weight with that staff member. That's what happened when I first started at camp. I felt like the director saw me, even for a little bit, but she saw me. And she's my mentor to this day. A little short lady, she's great, but that's because she saw me. So I think if we did that for more campers, more staff members, more parents, more families, more, it will look different. And we just have to, I think, just do it. Does
anyone else want to add? I think for me, with the question around whether it can be done, I think yes, it can be. But I think it's the piece around doing it well. If you're an all-white camp and all-white leadership, you can rock, but make sure that you do have those conversations, like AK mentioned, around power and privilege and your responsibility as white campers, because a lot of the times, white young people or white campers are not having these conversations, and BIPOC campers are. I imagine a world where we're centering BIPOC campers where they can just come have fun and don't have to talk about race, because that's their daily lived existence. But if white campers can go to camp and learn about that, that is a huge shift. That is an easy way to start thinking about how you decenter whiteness and allow people to critically see themselves so they can see other people at the same time. And I think the piece around doing it well, because I see camps doing really good work, like coming up with new policy and all those things. But if you don't have the diversity requirement, there's always going to be a blind spot. And yes, you should consult outside experience, but if you can have someone there, or people, not just someone, people there who can truly see both the macro and micro ways that equity and inclusion can happen, it's only going to make your camp stronger. So it does mean giving up power in a way where you may not be the leadership anymore. Maybe someone else needs to take that role and you take a different role. But like people have said, it's very difficult, but that is a piece of it. If you're really dedicated to DEI and justice, it means you have to give up power. So be really thoughtful and careful about if you're signaling that you're about this work, because all it is power. It's not window dressing. It's not just representation, it's power. Go ahead.
I wanted to add something that you said in the all white camp, all white leadership, all white campers, just like you said, Simone, think about the amazing work that could be done if they had social justice as an activity period. So then we could really shift from this white savior, oh, I need to save the kids in Africa, and really got into like spending time at your camp, your safer space, to really think about, why do I care about hunger? Why do I care about climate change? And connect it to you so you can know your truth, and that our young white kids can know their truth starting at 9 and 10 and 6 and 7. So when they become adults, when they become young adults, they are doing less harm, and they can speak their truth, and they can advocate, and they can be in social justice and social services in different ways, but it's authentic, and it's not from this, I have power, let me tell you what I'm going to do, but them really have ownership over the things that are important to them, that are important to the world. So even more, those camps who don't have the diversity yet, still, again, like you said, Simone, do the work well, and just reimagine a world where like they really got a chance to sit and talk about, like, why is this issue important to me? Not for the performative nature of it, but truly, why do I care about gender equity? Why do I care about sexuality? Like, why do I care about all these other things that white kids care about, but just they haven't had to put any deep thought into because it doesn't impact them in the same ways. So I just encouraging everybody out there to really think about that, and the like expansive change that can happen from white people. This is what it looks like to do your work, is to know yourself well enough to come into these spaces and listen and learn and be equitable.
The end. So we're gonna have one more question, but as we're asking this last question, for people who are on the call, please populate some questions in the chat. We'll take as much as we can till 3 p.m. But our last question is to give a little gift to you all, a little cookie. What are things people are doing well? What are things people are doing well? And if you want to add, if you have time, what can they improve upon? But what are some things that people can see as an example of what to do?
Well, at my org, I think something that we're doing well and have gotten better at is like telling the stories of our community, but in a meaningful way, especially as it relates to fundraising, so that we're not like tokenizing our youth. And we're in the process of even changing our mission so that we're giving our community, as they do, right? As they do have, but really highlighting their agency in our mission as well. And what I enjoyed about that process was allowing the staff, especially the direct service staff, to play a role in that.
With our org, the Y and Y camping, one thing that I've noticed that a lot of people are doing really, really well is recognizing Indigenous appropriations at all levels of their camps. Like the camp that I grew up at had Indigenous tribe names as their cabin names. Not great. A lot of camps, in my experience that I've visited and have worked at, have the similar things, and people are starting to now recognize that that is, in fact, appropriation, and taking steps to rectify that. That has been something that people are doing really, really well. So yeah.
You did it at the same time. Some things that folks are doing well. One, asking for help, admitting that you don't know and you ain't perfect, and help. So asking for help, seeking out those DEI consultants, and making professional development like mandatory. Something else I think people are doing well, simply things, but not simple, like pronouns, right? Being mindful of language and what does that look like? I would say I'm hearing more people talk about having EI trainings for their staff at camp. Shifting the questions you ask during your interview process. These are things that my org is doing as well. And just not being afraid to like talk about it. I feel like when I started this work in 2013, it was kind of whispered about like diversity, equity, and inclusion. And now, although sometimes it's a little performative, people are talking about it. So then my encouragement is like, hold them accountable. Said you got inclusion statement? Great. Now, how are we actually practicing that? So I think it's, again, seemingly small things that are really just big and integral. So that's what I'll leave. It's what people are doing.
Hey, wholeheartedly agree. I think you're having this conversation you hear today. You'll be there tomorrow. You were there a year ago. You've been there. You've been. If you haven't been there, you're maybe just thinking about getting there now. It's like, great. I'm not mad at you. Because you're doing something. And even if that is reading a book, it's like, take whatever steps you need. It's been a long time. I think everyone in the BIPOC community knows that it's not going to happen tomorrow, but we want it to happen in the camping world. And I'll take ownership for myself. I want it to happen. I'll wait. I'll be as patient as I can be. People in the camping world tends to stay in the camping world for quite a while. So I'm seeing that maybe 85, 90, if I'm really lucky, 105, sweet. If I have to wait that long, I hope I don't, but I will wait until you feel like you can get there. But know that I'm not going to be quiet. Probably not the people on this call are going to be quiet. And hopefully the people that are listening are not going to be quiet. So I have hope in my heart that it won't take until I'm 80. Although better hurry up. I'm not 80 yet, but I'm getting closer every day apparently. What are you doing right is that you're listening. You're having this conversation. You're listening to this conversation. You're talking to your white friends and your white family members and your white staff members and your BIPOC staff members and listening to what they have to say. If you're doing that even just a little bit, that's more than you've done in the past. Let's keep it going. So that's what's happening right now, and not just at camp. I think society wide, globally, it's happening to a certain extent. So just keep doing it. Keep doing it.
So I work with college students, so they're in the emerging adulthood space, but I understand they also make up for your camp staff, they make up pretty much your population, right? And so what I feel like our staff do in the organization that I work for really well is that they understand that young people, they're still young-ish, right? Young people, they often have experiences first and the language to back it up later. Because it's really difficult sometimes to verbalize a lot of what they've experienced. And so I think what our staff do really well is try to support them through forming some of that language around their experience, right? I work with a team of reading, writing teachers and math teachers, and through their different ways, I think it's helpful for young people to kind of craft their language and their stories around just some of the prompting questions that our staff have for them that I think are eye-opening and are conversation starters.
Thank you. So I appreciate you all sharing that. We're gonna hop to one question and then we're gonna come back for our final call to action because we don't wanna leave without leaving you all with a call to action. So I'll read out the question and anyone can take it. It says, for a camp where we have Black, Indigenous people of color and white staff, but majority white, what do y'all think is the best approach to staff training on equity and inclusion? We've tried many things over the years, and I'm not sure whether they've been helpful or harmful for our staff of color. We plan to bring in a consultant of color for the training as we have in the past, but curious if you would suggest a focus on implicit bias, focus on microaggressions, center BIPOC voices in some way? What are y'all's thoughts?
I would say this is also kind of like my call to action, is to focus on their individual identity and really being able to identify in what areas do my identities offer me privilege and what areas do they offer me the opportunity to oppress others. There was this chart called the Matrix of Oppression that I led some people through, just really being able to visualize where you fall as it pertains to your identity. And the areas in which you had the most privilege, I charge people to find out more about those other identities in that section. So like if you're talking about like age and you're an adult, right? So learn more about what children are being impacted, or elders are impacting them. So in your different identities, really identify how you can use your power to learn, educate yourself, and also give up some of that power to allow more equity for those who don't identify with the same privileges that you do. So I would say starting off with the individual identity, I think you also get a better buy-in because people will be able to be seen, right, in all the different identities, but also bring them back to the fact that race is that filter in which all identities are judged through. So talk to them about the individual identities, have them do those reflections around power and privilege, and then talk to them about the reality that race is the filter. So I would say start off there. And again, even with your consultant coming in, something that I've learned is like sometimes having like biracial, having a white trainer and having a trainer of color allows different people to hear things differently and also allows for different levels of accountability. I would also say I don't think it worked for us, but it was useful the summers we did it, was caucusing. And after having a training, having the Black and like BIPOC folk have a caucus and the white folks have a caucus so that we're not having to do each other's work. So those are some suggestions.
You're putting me on. And I was gonna say like a in-service training, like why not continue to have these conversations throughout camp? And especially since now the kids are like the epicenter, they're the stars of the show. And so there may be things that manifest throughout the summer that involve or could involve conversations around equity and inclusion. So you can keep the conversation going. Cause I think if you do like the whole one mic drop we did, like we talked about in the beginning and like and like, yay, like things have been great. You're not taking time to pause and reflect and to teach one another. So taking from the themes or pulling from the themes of this initial training in the beginning, maybe some of the language that you want to use to repeat in service or peer spaces throughout camp or throughout the season of camp. But I love the caucus idea. That's super fly. That's super fly. I've never been a part of something like that.
I like that too. And I like that too. And I just want to say real quick that I think implicit bias and microaggression training it's probably great, I think, for that midway point when they've had some experiences with, it's not like, well, last summer I dealt with this. It's more like, well, last week I dealt with this, right? So I think that it carries a little bit more weight. But hey, Kay, it's like really, and I guess the centering BIPOC voices, if you do have that, BIPOC and white staff, and you want BIPOC to speak up, but they're not ready to speak up, but you really want them to speak up, but coming from identity, everyone is starting on the same level. They're all sharing their identity. They can't, no, they're most likely not going to come in and say, I just did this microaggression the other day. It was great. Just want to let you know what I did. And they're not going to do that. But I feel, and I could be wrong, most people feel more comfortable coming in and saying, well, obviously I'm a white guy and, and I am cisgendered, whatever that means, they'll talk from where they are as opposed to what they did the other day, because they'll just shake their head like, okay, microaggressions, got it, check. But when they really talk, I find when people really talking about themselves, it's like they can't get away from it. They can't, like, I'm not going to come out and say I'm actually a white guy because I'm not, because you're looking at me, right? So they can't really hide that part. They have to be who they are, or who the person that we see. They may hide other parts of themselves, but they're the person that we see. right? So I think that's great, really looking at themselves and then how that interacts with the community that you're trying to create. And unfortunately, this work is not an hour long. It never is an hour long, but we always want to put it into an hour and say, yay, we did it. And it's never going to be that way. So you have to keep it going throughout the summer. Just the same way you do lifeguard training and lifeguard in service. You got to build up those muscles, build up that strength to keep this going, so if there's a way to do that, all in for that.
Yep, I think critical self-reflection is key, as well as talking about how your different identities intersect and where privilege and power intersect too. I also think it's important to examine intention versus impact, right? There's so many well-intended folks, white folks, but what are your actual impacts, right? And how can you find out what those impacts actually are and what they look like? So I think that's also a separate conversation. And I think that would be my one call to action too, is, examining your intention, examining impacts, right? And what does that look like? What are your expectations of staff, right? Knowing who your staff are, knowing where they are. I also wonder sometimes, how courageous would it be to involve some of the funders or board of directors in these conversations, right? Is it possible? Well, I mean, it's always possible, right? Is it possible though, right? And what's going to be the reception, right? I know that's a loaded question, but I think we know that power comes up top. These are the people who are directly giving our jobs and funding these experiences for young people and camp staff all around the country, right? Money talks, right? We know money talks in this capitalist society. And so when money talks, let's go to where it is. This money is not theirs to begin with. So we're going to take some of that back by having some of these conversations. Right. And I think those of us who are in a space of privilege, right? I think I'm in a space of privilege where I can do that, right? Just because of my race, I'm an Asian woman, light-skinned, and I think I'm more receptive to a lot of white people than I think some of my colleagues on here are. So I know that, and I'm not afraid to do that, right? And so, I mean, I think it's just something to think about.
Yeah, for me, I was, a few summers ago, I was the only BIPOC staff for me for that camp. And so the summer before was the summer that Moana was released. And so I grow my hair out as a celebration of my Filipino heritage. And a lot of kids weren't equipped to know that a bigger brown guy with long brown hair calling me Maui was racist. Okay, so because that is not my culture, that is not me. Completely different culture. So the following summer, I white staff of like, why is this racist, and like stuff like that. And so I was lucky enough, because I'm comfortable having those conversations as a brown man. But for the anonymous question asker, like, if your staff members are comfortable addressing those microaggressions, or in that case, that was a macroaggression, that was unwieldy. If they are comfortable, like in training, talking very candidly and open about those experiences and saying like, hey, some people in this room, and don't name names, like some people in this room engaged in this act, like this kind of really messed up thing, and really have them have a candid conversation about that and how that made them feel, because it really humanizes that experience of your BIPOC staff. And I find that when you have a human face and a human toll based on like an act like that, it's more impactful than just a slideshow.
So we're going to go to the call to action, but my take on this one, there are a couple things. You mentioned that you're not sure if it's been helpful or harmful to staff of color. I think it's really, really important for us not to assume, but to actually ask those questions. So ask staff of color, like, was this training helpful? Should we do something different? What would be the focus? I think we sometimes are scared of asking those questions because we may not like the answer, but that's the only way we'll know if harm is done, is to ask. And secondly, I think a lot of us tackle these conversations in piecemeal like topics like implicit bias, microaggressions. But if you just talk about identity, power, and privilege, all of these things will come out. But I think power is the ultimate conversation that people need to talk about. And implicit bias is great, but sometimes what the real word is critical self-reflection, which Adela helped me to realize too. So I think that's the piece. How can we have a conversation around critical self-reflection as counselors in camp? That would be the perfect topic. Last but not least, what are your calls to action? This is the piece where we don't want you to just log off your laptop and be like, that was a good combo. We're gonna leave y'all with some tools, some real talk about what we want you to do after you leave this space. So whoever would like to go first, what is your call to action to people on the call?
My call
I'll go
to
first.
action.
Who's going first?
I'll go.
Okay.
Like whenever I'm leaving a space is just to know that this work starts with you, right? This work starts with you. So whatever makes you uncomfortable, lean into and give yourself the permission and time to really dissect what that means for you and how that's going to help those around you. Once you sit with it, know that this work starts with you, and that those uncomfortable moments, as a Black woman, I'm nothing but uncomfortable, and I have to live through those moments. And unfortunately, has made me a better person. It's made my community, I think, a better people. We continue to innovate, continue to give. It starts with you. Be uncomfortable, lean into that. It's going to be transformative.
Kind of piggybacking off of that, my call to action, like once you have done that self-reflection, and you recognize that if you are in this for the right reasons, and you want your space to be diverse, find BIPOC-led organizations and that serve BIPOC youth and foster a relationship. I mean, like camp is all about relationships, right? Like foster a relationship with those groups, and invite them to your events. Hopefully they'll invite you to their events. Build and maintain those relationships. You are providing an experience, a phenomenal life experience that you can add to these kids' lives. So reach out, be vulnerable, because we're vulnerable all day, every day, and we can't take our vulnerabilities off. Be vulnerable with those groups. And if they say, no, we don't want to come out to your camp, okay, fine. Just find a new group, keep doing that work. And I understand that camp is also a business, so you might need to, like, instead of fully scholarshiping, do a reduced pricing year over year so that they are empowered to pick the weeks that work for them and have them come out. But it's a partnership, it's a relationship, and be ready to fail.
For BIPOC people on this call, your healing matters. And you need to take time for yourself, and like the weight of your community and working to serve and uplift each other is hard. And so like you can only be better if you take time for yourself, and please take that time. Yeah, that has helped me incredibly, is taking the time and taking a pause. I think has helped me be a better sister, a better daughter, a better supervisor, is taking the time for myself. And the next thing is trust your youth and trust your staff. I think sometimes I've experienced this, sometimes in this, when you're looking for your leadership staff, you're like, but that person can't be it. They don't have this, that, or the third, or I don't think like they're the most qualified. Really ask yourself why you're saying that. And like, are you focusing on like the wrong things, right, of this person? Or are you honing in on the right things? And are these things that you're honing on even even what's the word that I'm looking for? Like, is it really a deciding factor in giving someone the space to step into a leadership role, right? Or is it centered on like anti-Blackness? And like, you gotta like think about that, especially if you want diversity in your, I really think it's like, if I'm not given this opportunity because this person doesn't have this quality, what are you doing to coach them? Like, what are you investing enough time and resources and money to coach them into their professional development? Are you telling them directly, I believe in you, I want to see you come back, let's get you going? Like, these are things you can develop.
Yep. Just along the lines of what Liz is saying is, I think white folks have a tendency, and I think BIPOC folks too, have a tendency to frame BIPOC young people in a deficit lens. But we are coming in with so many assets, we're coming in with so many capitals, that I think we should start with that. We should start with building up from that capital and enhancing those capitals. We're coming in with so much, with resistance capital, cultural capital, navigational capital, linguistic, all of this, right? We're coming in with, and I think that's where the lessons can start, right? That's where your activities can start, and saying, you know what, we have a diverse camp staff here, we have a diverse camper set here. Let's start with what we think we may know, right? Not assume, but let's ask, like Simone was saying, ask folks, like, what do you want to see, right? And I think assuming that, we're coming in not with all this trauma, but we're coming in with a lot of this healing that's going to be lifelong for us. And this work is for the long haul. And so I think reframing that about who we are as a people, that's going to also help with so many of what you're trying to accomplish.
I've been working on basically 3 steps that I want to give you as a takeaway. One of them, the first one you probably maybe have already done, or maybe you're working on it, and that is stand up. Stand up for what you believe is right, what you believe your camp stands for, what you believe your family stands for, what you believe our society stands for. Stand up for that. And maybe you've already done that, maybe you haven't, but maybe you should if you haven't done so yet. The second part is stand aside. I don't need you to fight for me. I need you to fight with me. I don't need you to stand in front of me because you're trying to protect me. Stand next to me because I am standing there also, right? And I am not here I don't want to see you get hurt, and you don't want to see me get hurt, right? Stand next to me. So stand aside, not, run away, but stand next to me. And then the last one is somewhat a difficult one, but I'll put it this way: pay up. And I don't necessarily mean just money. I mean your time, your energy, your thinking about this, your your time in looking for the right person, the right person, if you will. Whatever it is, pay up. Will you have to, should you spend more money to get what you want at your camp? If that answer is yes, well, do it. Do it. It's simple, so yeah, pay up. So again, stand up, which if you haven't done yet, do so now. Stand aside, and then pay up. Put the resources there, put it out there for what you want to have happen at your camp.
All good advice. I second everything that was said. The last thing I would say is, like, make sure you don't make this a check the box thing. Like, oh, I went to that one workshop. Mm-hmm. This has to be year-round, daily practice. If you're really committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And like you said, it starts with you, critical self-reflection, and bringing in diverse voices to help you continue that work and do it, not just do something, but do it well. So with that, we're gonna end. We are 7 minutes over. I see that most of y'all have stayed with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you listening in and decentering yourself and listening to our voices. For the BIPOC people out there, thank you for also joining us. I hope this was healing for you and you feel seen and heard as well. Thank you. And we're going to end there. Any final thoughts from folks?
Have a great summer, everyone.
Yes, have a great summer. Oh, wait, sorry, I forgot one last thing. I have to share the last slide. So if you want to stay in contact with us, screenshot this. These are all of our emails. We'll be sending out an email with resources, with our emails to follow up if you need consultants. Everybody on here is capable to support you. And we thank you from the Summer Camp Society and ORS for being here with us and having this really new critical conversation. Thanks, y'all.